Elections Alberta says country singer Corb Lund's anti-coal mining petition has failed. The singer says he's shocked but not surprised as the campaign faced numerous rule changes and roadblocks. Connor Hogg is here with more now. And Connor, why was this deemed unsuccessful?
Jeff, Elections Alberta says issues came up when it started to examine the signatures collected by volunteers. It says there was incomplete elector information, invalid dates, and issues with canvasser witness declarations. Some signed the petition more than once, and some either provided invalid contact information, were unwilling or unable to verify that information, or didn't provide contact info at all. Lund says he submitted 205,000 signatures. Elections Alberta says it validated just over 196,000 of those. From there, it verified slightly more than 172,000. To pass, the petition needed 10% of the 1.7 million votes cast in the 2023 provincial election.
Canada is making major moves to expand its energy exports and reduce its dependence on the United States. A new West Coast oil pipeline proposal and the failure of Alberta's water not coal petition are changing the discussion around Canada's resource economy. Together, these developments show the country moving ahead with projects that supporters say could strengthen exports, create jobs, and open more international markets, while environmental groups continue to oppose the direction. Two developments hit Alberta's energy sector simultaneously, one that removed a domestic political obstacle and one that advanced the most ambitious pipeline proposal in Canadian history. A citizen-led petition calling for permanent coal mining restrictions in the eastern slopes was rejected by the Alberta government after failing to meet the legal signature threshold. And on July 3rd, 2026, Canada and Alberta jointly announced the formal submission of a new West Coast oil pipeline proposal targeting 1 million barrels per day to the Pacific coast. Both developments landed in the same week. Together, they describe an Alberta energy sector moving forward on multiple fronts at once. The Water Not Coal petition was organized by a coalition of ranchers, Indigenous leaders, environmental organizations, and musicians, most prominently Alberta country artist Corb Lund, whose public profile and vocal opposition to Eastern Slope's coal development had given the campaign significant media attention. The petition sought to force a provincial referendum that would have permanently restricted new coal mining development in the Eastern Slopes, the headwaters region of southern Alberta's major river systems, including the Oldman, Bow, and Red Deer rivers. The Eastern Slopes provide drinking water to significant portions of southern Alberta and support ranching and agricultural operations across a wide geographic area. The campaign gathered thousands of signatures in support. But Elections Alberta confirmed the petition did not meet the verified signature threshold required under Alberta's Citizen Initiative Act to force a referendum question onto the ballot. The legal requirement, 10% of eligible voters from the previous general election collected within a defined time window, was not met. Elections Alberta's confirmation ended the campaign's legislative pathway. The coalition behind the petition has not announced a next step as of the date of the Alberta government's confirmation. The provincial government's position throughout the petition campaign was that existing environmental regulatory frameworks, reclamation requirements, and land use planning tools already provide adequate oversight for any coal development proposals in the region. Critics of that position, including the ranching families and First Nations communities who organized the coalition, argued that existing protections are insufficient and that the Eastern Slopes' water-producing function requires categorical protection rather than project-by-project regulatory review. The failed petition removes one immediate political pressure point from Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's government as it simultaneously advances the West Coast oil pipeline proposal. The pipeline announcement came the following day, July 3rd, when Canada and Alberta formally submitted the pipeline proposal to the Federal Major Projects Office following the July 1st deadline that the May 15th Carney Smith Implementation Agreement had set as the submission target. The 1 million barrel per day West Coast oil pipeline is the largest single energy infrastructure proposal in Canada's modern history. At full capacity, the pipeline would carry approximately 27% of Canada's current total oil sands production directly to BC's Pacific coast for loading onto tankers bound for Asian markets. The commercial logic driving the proposal is documented in the Western Canadian Select price differential data. every barrel of Alberta crude that reaches Asian buyers through a Pacific Tidewater terminal rather than through American pipeline infrastructure into Midwest and Gulf Coast. Refineries receives Brent-linked pricing rather than the WTI discounted pricing that landlocked Alberta export constraints have historically imposed. A 1 million barrel per day addition to Pacific export capacity applied to the WCS-WTI differential improvement documented following the Trans Mountain expansion's entry into service in May 2024 would generate additional producer revenue measured in billions of dollars annually. The Carney-BC agreement, signed July 2nd, the day before the pipeline submission, is the political and legal architecture that makes the pipeline proposal viable in a way that previous Alberta to Pacific proposals were not. BC Premier David Eby said directly at the Vancouver press conference alongside Carney, "We recognize our constitutional position and we do not have the authority to stop a new pipeline. We will not be going to court to fight a pipeline project." That statement removes the provincial legal opposition that blocked the Northern Gateway proposal in 2016 and complicated the Trans Mountain expansion throughout its construction period. BC is not endorsing the pipeline, but the province has publicly committed to non-interference in federal pipeline jurisdiction, conditioned on the North Coast tanker ban remaining in place and BC receiving a meaningful economic benefit share, including a possible annual royalty. The North Coast tanker ban itself, the Oil Tanker Moratorium Act prohibiting crude oil tankers from loading at terminals on BC's North Coast, is preserved in the July 2nd federal BC agreement. Carney confirmed explicitly that the moratorium will stay in place in accordance with any proposed pipeline route. That confirmation means any pipeline routed to the North Coast terminals that Alberta's internal planning documents had been evaluating, including Observatory Inlet, Nasoga Gulf, and the Northern Gateway alignment route to Kitimat, is not viable under the current federal policy framework. The commercially viable route, as both the federal government and BC have now publicly framed it, is one terminating on BC's south coast, largely following the existing Trans Mountain corridor through the Fraser Valley and Lower Mainland. The South Coast route alignment carries specific regulatory advantages from the Trans Mountain precedent. The Trans Mountain expansion, a 1,150-kilometer pipeline running from Edmonton to Burnaby that entered commercial service in May 2024 after clearing every federal environmental, Indigenous consultation, and judicial review challenge, established a legal record of federal pipeline jurisdiction over provincial objections. The courts confirmed during Trans Mountain's approval process that interprovincial pipelines are exclusively federal jurisdiction. That legal foundation applies equally to any new pipeline following a similar southern alignment. The regulatory pathway for a South Coast route is the most clearly defined of any option Alberta was evaluating. The July 1st CUSMA non-extension by the United States adds commercial urgency to the pipeline proposal's timeline. CUSMA's annual review process entered without the 16-year extension. Canada's SOT extends the trade uncertainty that has motivated Canada's energy diversification strategy since early 2025. Every month of annual review uncertainty is a month in which Canadian producers have commercial reasons to prefer buyers outside the American market over American refineries whose access to Canadian crude remains subject to tariff, trade policy instability. A 1 million barrel per day Pacific pipeline directly addresses that preference by providing physical infrastructure to reach Asian buyers at Brent pricing.